Somebody said, I don't know the key to success, but the key to failure is trying to please everybody. You may not please everybody. In fact, you can't. And you may not please very many people at all, for that matter. But if you please God, well, that's the criterion for true success. After Jesus' transfiguration on the mountain, where he shone as brilliantly white, and his deity was revealed, Peter, James, and John were convinced that Jesus was the Messiah, but they were confused on one point, because they'd grown up as good Jews believing that Elijah would appear to the Israelites before the Messiah came. And so they're thinking, well, the Messiah is here, but they don't remember ever having seen Elijah. And so they question Jesus. In fact, in Matthew chapter 17, beginning in verse 10, the disciples asked him, then why do the scribes say that first Elijah must come? And he answered, Elijah does come, and he will restore all things, but I tell you that Elijah has already come. And they did not recognize him, but did to him whatever they pleased. So also the Son of Man will certainly suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them of John the Baptist. John the Baptist came in the spirit and the power of Elijah. He came warning people to clean up their act. He told people to repent, to get ready for the Christ who would soon come to them, teaching and ministering to their needs. And now, just as Elijah, as we know from the Old Testament, Elijah rubbed Ahab and Jezebel the wrong way, John the Baptist also did not please everyone. For one thing, John didn't dress to impress. He simply wore a garment of camel's hair and a leather belt. And, I have heard from various sources, I've heard more than one preacher say that they would preach what their church believed, even if it wasn't what they believed, because they wanted to keep the peace, they wanted to keep their employment secure. But John the Baptist, he didn't consult an opinion poll, he didn't consult a focus group when he was preparing his sermons. He told it like it was. He did what Paul told Timothy to do in 2 Timothy 4, verse 2. Paul said to Timothy, you preach the word, be ready in season and out of season. Reprove, rebuke, exhort with complete patience and teaching. Preach the truth if it's popular, preach the truth if it's not. John was so bold that he rebuked Herod for taking his brother's wife as his own, and in vengeance for this rebuke, Herod's wife would literally have John's head on a platter. As a matter of fact, that's where the term, that phrase comes from. John the Baptist's boldness for God would get him killed. But in comparison to the eternal victory that he would gain, the loss of his head was what Paul would refer to in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 17 as a slight momentary affliction. Elijah's boldness for God caused him a little bit of trouble with Ahab and Jezebel, but a little while later, he would be taken up to heaven in a flaming chariot. And what's the postscript on Elijah? Well, we go back to the transfiguration of Jesus. He was last seen standing there with Moses at the transfiguration, doing quite well. It's probably safe to say that John the Baptist today, in eternity, isn't doing too badly either. There's no need, granted, to be intentionally offensive, and in fact, we shouldn't be. Paul, look at what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, beginning in verse 32, he says, give no offense to Jews or Greeks or to the church of God, just as I try to please everyone in everything I do, not seeking my own advantage, but that of many, that they may be saved. Be imitators of me as I am of Christ. Don't go out of your way to be offensive and shocking. All the same, if serving God means going against the grain, if it means being countercultural, if it means that you must step on toes, then so be it. It must be that way. Paul would finally face the death penalty for not compromising in his ministry for Jesus. But look at what he said as he sat on death row in 2 Timothy chapter 4, beginning in verse 6. 2 Timothy chapter 4, beginning in verse 6, he said, "For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. And henceforth there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but to but also to all who have loved his appearing." So stand up for Jesus no matter what. And doing that is not politically correct in our world today, just as it hasn't been for a very large portion of history. Stand up for Jesus not because it's the popular thing to do, but because it's the right thing to do. Because it will please God. Because in the end, God wins, and if you're on his side, you do too. In the end, stand up for Jesus no matter what, and you will be glad that you did.